Hey, Karen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Well, we're hanging in.
Good.
We're hanging in. Okay. It's 7 o'clock. I don't know. Is there anyone here that knows of anybody else who might possibly join us? No? Okay. If not, then let's call this meeting to order. And we'll start with the roll call. I am here. Mr. Brown?
Here.
And Mr. Saylor?
Here.
Mr. Stack?
Here.
And Mr. Warble?
Here.
And Miss Simon? Not here. All right. Okay, let's pledge of allegiance if we could. Everybody, I pledge allegiance
To
to the
the
flag
flag
of the United States of
United
America,
States of America, to the republic
for which it stands,
which stands
one
one
nation,
nation
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
for all.
Okay, do we have visitors this evening? So for visitors this evening, as a general protocol for everybody, that will make it easier just for the recording. Jason, I assume you're recording this.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Just as a protocol, if most of us could go ahead, you'll notice in the lower left-hand corner, you will have a place where you can see a microphone. And that microphone, if you click on it, it will turn it off and it will say mute and it'll have a little X through it, or it'll be live. Mine's live right now. So if you can see the screen, I've turned mine off. But as a general rule for online, if you could, when you want to speak, if you would turn your microphone on, just click it and unmute it. And if you're not speaking, go ahead and mute. Sometimes it will minimize the amount of feedback that we would have in the recording. Any questions on that? No. Okay, good. So I think the first thing that we only have one case. Do we have, I do want to go ahead and swear in visitors. Sorry, I'm shuffling papers here. So do we have visitors that plan to testify this evening either for or against this appeal? Okay, there being none, we will move on. The case before BZA this evening is BZA number 202-0003. The owner is Landon Copeland. The address is 12145 Amity Road, Brookville, Ohio, 45309. The property is located on the north side of Amity Road and east of Johnsville, Brookville Road. The parcel's indicated in your notes. I won't delineate that right now. And the property is in an agricultural district. The nature of this appeal is to build a 3,200 square foot pole barn, 80 feet width and a 40-foot depth with a 12-foot height, with one bedroom apartment. Mr. Copeland will reside in the apartment until a house is built and then use the apartment as a mother-in-law suite. So I'm going to ask again, there may be somebody who may need sworn in. Is there anyone who wants to speak in favor of this appeal?
We would, I assume.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, I'm going to swear you in, and hopefully I get this right with my notes. If you could just sort of follow along with me, and maybe I won't mess it up too bad. So
Okay.
if you would state your name.
I, Landon
Do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will testify
that I will testify
in the proceedings this evening
in the proceedings this evening,
truthfully and to the best of my ability.
truthfully and to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to testify this evening for or against? Okay. If not, I'd like to hear from anybody who would like to speak in favor of this appeal. So, Mr. Copeland, I assume that's going to be you.
Yes, so I would definitely like this appeal to go through. I am a little bit confused, I guess, on some of the reasonings behind the stipulations. Karen had printed me out a couple of the articles that mentioned about a home occupation shall not be conducted in an accessory building, and also permitted accessory uses for agricultural, residential, and office residential district, about a guest house, in parentheses, without kitchen facilities or rooms for guests in an accessory building, provided such facilities are used for the occasional housing of guests of the occupants of the principal building, and not as rental units or for permanent occupancy. I guess
So there is clarity you would like on that?
well, yeah, I mean, I would like to know kind of the reasons why and whatnot, and what benefits and the downfalls for the township are. I think you guys have heard our situation and what our thoughts and uses for the building in the future are. So outside of that, I really don't have a whole lot of argument, not knowing any of the real, the articles are so vague. I guess I need to, have them elaborated for me before I can develop an argument on why this shouldn't go on. So.
Okay. Karen, do you want to speak to that?
Well, the only thing that I could say is that is the zoning information that I have. That's why I sent it to him. I will say that I did make a phone call to Greg, hold on a second,
Sure.
let me grab my notes. It was Chad, I think, at the health department, and ask him about the zoning or the what they needed in order for them to approve what Landon's wanting to do. He said that the only thing that they were concerned with or interested in was the water sewer, and that he has given them a permit for them to go ahead. I also talked to Joe at the Montgomery County at the building there in Montgomery County, I'm sorry. And he also stated that he would approve what Landon is wanting to do, but that we would have to go by our zoning and whatever you guys decided.
Okay. So you said that was Chad at Sewer and Water or the Health Department?
No, it was at the health department, but
Okay.
the only concern they had was the sewer and water.
And so, but I just want to make sure I'm clear, but they did approve a permit?
Yes, for him in order to get the sewer and water hooked up.
Okay. So they have approved a permit in order to get it hooked up, but they have some concern?
No, they didn't have any concern. It was Joe at Montgomery County that said that he would approve having an apartment in the building that he's wanting, but that we obviously have to follow our zoning information.
Sure. So Chad at the Health Department didn't have a concern, and eventually he has issued a permit.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
So
my
there's,
understanding, yes.
okay. So there's no issues at the health department.
No,
The concern is simply at the building, Montgomery County, that they would approve if in fact the BZA did.
correct.
Okay.
That's what I was told.
Okay. All right. Yes, go right ahead, Landon. You want to hit your microphone.
Yes.
There you go.
So yes, we have, I believe it was Chris Doggett at the Montgomery County, the water and sewage, and he did approve a permit for me to install the mound system, and the mound system has already been installed, and it is sized properly to support the apartment and the barn and the future home.
Okay.
So just wanted to make that known.
All right.
So.
So before we move on, Karen, do you have anything else for us? Just in terms of clarification?
No, that's basically the information that I have. And I did send Landon the articles that were in the zoning to, so he would see what we have.
Sure. Great. Okay. Good. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this appeal? Hearing none, I'm going to move on. Is there anyone who would like to speak against this appeal? I'm not hearing anyone, so I'd like to entertain. I'm sorry?
Hold on. I think I've got the mic on.
Yes, you do, David. Go right ahead. I mean, is this something for the open portion or the closed portion?
Maybe we better do it for the closed portion when we close it and discuss it.
I'm just looking to see if there's anyone outside of the BZA who would like to speak in favor or against. And if there is,
sorry.
That's okay, David. If there's no one else to speak either in favor of this appeal or against this appeal, I'd like to entertain a motion that we close the open portion of the hearing. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Motion was made by David Saylor to close the open portion. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Mike Brown.
Seconded, Mike Brown. And without objection, so ordered. Let's keep moving. So the board is in session. Do you have any questions or thoughts, David?
Well, yes, it does concern what the zoning is in that area. It is agricultural, which puts some limits on what he can build in a pole barn. Also, there's some question as to, depending on the what rating it is, R1, R2, R3, whatever, that puts a stipulation on the square footage of the resident can be built. And at the moment, we're really
on the actual zoning. You're talking about the zoning reg?
Yeah, the zoning itself puts a restriction on what size unit can be built. I don't have my book here in front of me, and I should have. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Do you, Karen? Do you know what the what exact code that is zoned?
No, but I can look it up.
Okay, that would be great.
I have the information for the different R1, R2, and R3.
Yeah.
If it's an R1, it stipulates it at 1,600 square feet. If it's zoned R2, it's stipulated at 1,100 square feet. And if it's an R3, it's stipulated at 950 square feet.
And so do we know whether this is an R1, 2, or 3, Karen?
No, I don't, not off the top of my head. Let me look while you guys are talking.
Thank you. David, go ahead.
Well, actually, you know, the limitation is that I'm looking at is the fact that And I'm saying this not either for it or against it at the moment. We're just discussing it. But
Absolutely.
I am concerned about having approving a residence in that pole barn right now. And then 2 or 3 years from now, him coming back and saying we want to build a new house, and then we would be permitting, if we permitted it, that would be 2 residents on the same property, and I don't believe our zoning allows that. Not in a residential one, anyway.
So in an R1, and I don't have. I apologize. I don't have the book in front of me either. So the question is that once we know what the zoning is on it, whether it's an R1, an R2, or an R3, that affects what's allowable. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mike, by any chance, do you have that with you?
I do. But I don't see anything spelled out particularly other than it says providing for a single family dwelling on R1, R2, and R3. And I guess that's what I was kind of hung up on. You know,
Okay.
I don't see where we could effectively deny this petition unless it falls outside the guidelines of the square footage for whatever the R rating is for that area.
For the pole barn?
However, correct, with the residents. However, you know, when it comes back to us in 2 or 3 or 4 years, whatever the case is, you know, it could cause a problem at that time having a dual residence on one property.
Can I ask, do any of the board members or Karen, do any of us know whether or not there's precedence for this? I'm going to assume not.
We've never been fronted with this before, I don't think. Not in my 15 years.
Okay. Okay. I'll be honest, David, I haven't seen it before either. I do remember there was discussion one time, it's been many years ago, of somebody who was talking about requesting and squashed it when they realized that they would end up with 2 residences on the same property, or what would be considered 2 residences. And they didn't go through with it, but I've never seen one come before the board before.
The nearest thing that we have been faced with is the fact where we've been asked 2 or 3 times to let them put a mobile home or a trailer in the rear of the house for a mother-in-law or a father-in-law. And we allowed it, but it was with the stipulation that if something happened or when something happened to either one of those, then the trailer or motorhome had to be moved.
That's true. I agree with that. I remember those instances.
In this case, I don't think that guy, what's his name? I done forgot.
Mr. Coleman.
Mr. Copeland is going to want to tear that apartment apart.
No, I don't think. I think the intention, at least as it's stated in the documentation that we have, is that the intention is that that apartment would then be used as a mother-in-law's suite.
Right. My mother-in-law wouldn't stand to be put in the barn.
Well, I'm not going to get into that discussion. I think many of us might want to avoid that discussion. So, go ahead, Karen.
I checked on the zoning and it only says that it's an RA, so it's a residential agriculture. That's the only thing it states.
Okay.
I found that also. That's how it was listed in the star. And when I went through the zoning text, I couldn't find a designation or any tabs that contained any articles concerning RA.
See, and my assumption was, and I could be wrong on this, But my assumption was if in fact something was not designated, it was a residential, RA, residential agricultural, that that it was automatically an R1, unless it was specifically designated otherwise. I don't know if anyone knows. David, do you know?
No, I think you're right, though. I think that's what it is. The only thing I've ever heard discussed.
Yeah, that's been my assumption, certainly, because we haven't had to split the hair before.
Right.
No. But if it's R1, then his square footage don't meet it.
There's 960 square feet in the current design that's listed on the plans.
So if there's 950 square feet in the current design, then David, I would think it's as an R1, it would in fact meet, because the R1 limitation is 1,600 square feet, unless I wrote that down wrong. Mike?
It says the minimum floor area per living unit is 1,600 square feet.
Right, for an R1.
That would be the minimum. So
Right.
that would mean it would be 16 linear feet short of the allowable usage space for an R1.
Okay,
Because
for the residential.
It's actually not correct. It's only 960 square feet.
Okay,
If it was listed as an R2, it would be fine, or as an R3, it would be fine because the R3 restriction is 950 feet,
right.
square feet.
Okay, and that's the minimum. That's not a max.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. I'm sorry. I did not. So one of the questions that we have in front of us, potentially before we were to make a decision, certainly here this evening, or I would think we would want to, and that is the question of whether or not the actual designation of this is in fact an R1, 2, or 3, because it affects what we would be giving a variance for. If in fact the board would decide to give a variance on this, we'd have to be clear because, as David said, it would, if in fact it is an R1, and my assumption has in the past been if it's an RA, and I didn't hear another assumption, it was an R1. We would probably have to clarify that, because if it was an R3, and nobody here seems to have the answer to that tonight, if it was in fact an R3, then it would in fact meet those guidelines, and there wouldn't need to be a variance on the square footage.
What's confusing is, excuse me, in the preamble on Article 11 for R3, it says the district has been established to provide for a single family dwelling with a minimum of 10,000 square feet lot. And then it goes back and talks about the actual building area itself, and that does designated as 950 square feet. So if it did fall under R3, it would be acceptable.
However, Mike, you had mentioned before, and I think David was alluding to this, was that if in fact it did meet, however, what problem would that present later with the plans that they have, which of course is to use this until such time as they were able to build on that property. So the intention is to build.
Correct.
So we need to be looking at all of these issues. David, was there anything else that you wanted to bring to our attention?
Well, that was the biggest thing, Mike. I'm not bringing it up to oppose.
Sure.
It's just to bring up more information because we really don't know whether it's an R1, R2, R3. Right. If it does revert to an R1, the square footage don't meet the minimum requirements. On the other hand, whatever we do here can definitely affect him when he's wanting to build that house. And I hope he understands that we're looking at that for his benefit also, as well as what the zoning code requires.
This is Brad. Isn't the big issue here more than the R rating is that it's a dual residence? Isn't that really the
potentially? Yes, I think you're right, Brad. Potentially that is. I just hadn't really pushed on that yet, but yes. Did you have some thoughts on that, Brad?
Well, I think the architect could give us what criteria it falls in. I'm not that concerned about that. You know, I think it's a beautiful barn, beautiful design. You know, we got a new family moving into Township, which is great. And you know, the variance, I guess, in my opinion, would be on the dual residence. Karen, have you where is the dual residence in the zone book? I'm having trouble finding it.
I have not been able to find anything about a dual residence.
So it presents, go ahead, Mike.
This is my, I've looked through every article in the zoning code, and I've not been able to locate that either.
Okay, so what happens is that when something isn't mentioned, it in and of itself may not be prohibited, but we may be based upon what we have to look at on what is mentioned, and what is mentioned is the intention of a single family residence.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
And so, I'm not neither for nor against. I just think we need to be clear on what are the issues that we have to address. Clearly, the zoning, you know, of this particular piece, whether it's an R1, 2, or 3, because we need to be aware of what precedents we're setting. If we're going to set a precedence, okay, but we need to be clear about what those precedents are. In this particular case, we would also be talking about a variance. This appeal, if I understand it correctly, would in fact also be providing a variance from the code from the standpoint of a single family residence, unless, and this is again about interpretation, unless its definition as a mother-in-law's suite or a family suite is considered to be a part, which some people might say, of the same residence. In other words, on the same property, as instead of a dual residence with different families living on the same property. It's an issue of interpretation, and I'm not coming down either way, but I think those two issues are there. David.
I have a question. In terms of buildings for houses, I mean, I know your old traditional stick-built houses up to snuff and all that, but is a pole building addressed as being a legitimate house structure?
It's a good question. Karen?
The only thing that I can say is by going through the zoning text, are the two articles which Landon has already read. But Article 49, Section 4905, the standards says that a home occupation shall not be conducted in an accessory building.
A home occupation. Is that correct?
Occupation.
Okay, so for instance, if I'm a writer and I'm working at home, I should not be permitted to do that homework in the barn. Is that what you think it means? Because if I heard correctly, I heard home occupation.
Right, a home occupation shall not be conducted in a accessory building.
Right.
I mean, that's the text.
Sure.
I'm with you, David. I mean, I'm with you, Michael. I think it's occupation is occupation as an occupying a residence, but occupation as in the use of it for productive use as a job. Because if you look at Article 49, it talks about the home occupation should not generate noise, vibration, bright lights, glare, fumes, odors, or anything like that as you go down through the text, which would not be related to a residence, but would be more related to an occupation as a money-making venture.
Right. So when my grandson, sets up his welding business, which he dreams of, that's the kind of thing we potentially might be talking about here.
That's how I understand Article 49.
Okay. it's a question on my part. I'm just bringing up the question of the definition and the interpretation of what the language is. David, did you have a thought on that?
Yes, really what we're talking about here is a residence.
I'm sorry,
The thing
David?
is, if this was a house that, am I on the mic?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. We wouldn't even be discussing this if this was a house he was building.
That's right.
The barn would come later. Okay. And therefore, we wouldn't have the concern of this. The way it is, Mr. Copeland is really asking to build a residence. I don't care whether it's a pole barn or a house or what it is going to be a residence for 3 or 4 years, more than likely. So we need to come down to that. I'm not saying to turn him down, but
Sure.
I am saying it is definitely going to jeopardize building that house later. And I think he's going to be in more of a bind if he don't get approval on that. So I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him have all kinds of these problems. A new guy in the neighborhood, we try to take care of him, but I got to be honest about it also.
So, David, would we be presuming that if in fact, at least in terms of the way we can interpret this, that as you're saying, that residence within that pole barn, that once there would be then application for the building, the home site residence to be built, that's where the conflict would come in terms of the regulation.
I believe I'm right.
Okay. Well, that the one thing that it does seem to be clear is that there is no language in that we're aware of that is in our zoning code that addresses dual residence, but it does address the intention of a single residence on a piece of property.
Yeah. Yes, it does, and we've always went by it that way, but to start with, as a single family residence, if it's R1, his square footage don't meet the criteria.
Right, and that's
If it's
a
R2,
second
it
issue.
still don't meet it. Pardon?
That's true. You're correct that the actual zoning of the property, whether it's an R1, R2, or R3, is an issue.
We do need to know that. And the things we're pointing out is up to him if he wants to pursue it as a pole barn with an apartment or build a house. I mean, but we need to know something about the R1, R2, R3, whatever it is.
Okay.
And then we'll have to put an opinion according to that.
All right. So if I could, if you don't mind, I'd like to sort of continue around the board. Mr. Warble, Brad, do you have any other questions or concerns that you want to bring up, Brad?
No, but I think the designation should come from an architect. I don't know that we need to be doing that. And the overarching question is the dual residence, and if we wanted to go forward with the stipulation that it be a mother-in-law residence down the road, I don't really have a problem with that.
So, in other words, it's a part of that we're not trying to set a residence for or a precedent for a separate residence. In other words, it's still family.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I hear you, Brad. Mr. Steck, do you have any other issues or things that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I was out there today and looked at the property. First of all, it's beautiful. Nice setting. And I love woods because I live in one. But you're not even going to see much of any of it back there is my observation. So I'm really not so concerned about, having this go forward. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I understand having precedence of, you know, if this opens it up to a Pandora box and everybody that comes along wants to build a house gets to have two on one. And I don't think that there's zoning addressing that exactly yet. Maybe that's something that needs to be addressed for the future.
Yep.
I mean, this is kind of a test to me to see if it flies, you know, and I personally don't have a problem with it, but I, you know, down the road,
Right.
I don't know.
You may not know what's coming down the road. I see what you mean. Mr. Brown, Mike.
Yes, I think it, again, I was at the property and I think it's a beautiful spot. I think that what he's doing is going to be a great addition to the township. And I think that it's a great idea. I think we need some definition. The thing that I would like to do, I think that we need to do as a board is to make sure that however we address this, that we make it clear what our intention is. So when the house is built in 2 or 3 years or 4 years, whenever that happens, there could be different people sitting on this board. And I would hate for him to have a sense of comfort with doing something moving forward. And then when he applies for this, if we haven't made clear stipulations and definitions in our ruling, that someone else or some other board could defeat what we're trying to achieve here. And I just don't want him to get behind, behind something that he can't get out of. And, I think he'll probably build a beautiful house and it'll be a great addition to the township. I just want to make sure that it all works out in the long run and that we just don't put a Band-Aid on it here, that we make sure we address it for now and for when the house is built.
Yeah. Thank you. So are there any other comments or questions before we move any further from our board members?
Yeah, as far as in the future, I mean, if we approve it here, why would he even have to go back he would just go in for a regular building permit. It wouldn't be an appeal at that point. Appeal's already been done when he builds his house.
Well, the only thing I can say is that I don't disagree with you, Brad, but the only thing is that whether or not in the building of the home, whether there is something that, again, also sets outside of some aspect of the zoning code and therefore needs a variance or any reason that it might come before the BZA. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, here's another slant. If the house touched the corner of this building, would it just be an attached garage at that point?
Yeah, and so there's a lot in the future we don't know. So this comes to Mike's point, if I can, that whatever it is we do want, if it is the board's intention to support this, understanding that this creates some precedent, and not only for anyone else potentially, but also specifically for this particular resident and owner in terms of what their next steps are, that we need to be very specific and very clear as much as we possibly can. I want to ask one other question here before we move too much further, and that is the clarification as to whether or not the zoning for this particular property is R1, R2, or R3. Is that a concern that anyone wants to have met, an understanding of what that is prior to us making a decision?
It is with me.
Okay, David. All right, Mike, how about you?
I think to make the correct decision, we need to understand what our zone it is.
Okay. All right. David, did you have any thoughts on that?
I agree. We need to know which it is.
All right.
Because it doesn't seem to be clear, and to make a decision and not have all the material, I think we should find out.
All right. Brad, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, to me, it's a non-issue. I mean,
Okay.
It's gonna fall into one of those categories. So.
Yeah, and the question is whether what kind of precedent we're setting. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Okay.
you know, to me, what difference is if he made the whole thing and, you know, had a 10 by 10 garage at the end of it and the rest of it was living, what difference does it make?
Okay. All right. So I'm going to make a suggestion here, unless there are other, and ask this question. Is there any board member who has any other major issue that they'd like to address in terms of questioning this appeal, either any concern whatsoever, before we move any further? If not, I am going to suggest that two things to guide us on this particular appeal. I think David's right. We haven't seen this before. And I think Mike's correct in that we need to be very clear and very specific in this in order to understand what precedent we potentially might be setting, since we haven't seen this before. And also, if we are to approve this, under what circumstances and with the clarity of our intention and all specifics in order to protect the appellant in this case. I think the piece that we're missing, and the majority of the board, I can see at least feels that since we are setting some precedent, that we should get clarification on the zoning for this. Is it an R1? Is it an R2? Is it in fact an R3? If it was an R1, what's it take to change something from an R1 to an R3? I don't know the answer to that, but those are some questions. So Karen, I'd like to ask you, if I can, would you be able to get the answers to both of those questions? Number one, is this particular property that is the essence of this appeal zoned R1, R2, and R3? Which one of those is it zoned? So if you could find that out for us. And then the second, I'm just wondering, that seems to be the most critical. Do you think you can find that out?
I certainly will give it my best shot and try.
And if you could, the second piece, I guess I'm hesitating but I'd like you to be able, and maybe it's an educational point for us. I'd like you to be able to share with the board, especially with the kind of precedent we might be getting ready to set. I'd like you to share with the board also the information of, if something is zoned and are in one zoning code, how might it be changed to another? What the process is for that, if in fact that's the case. Can you find that out for us?
I sure will try, yes.
That would be great. That being the case, unless there is another issue on this, it's my suggestion that we table this until we have that information. And I would like to entertain a motion now to table this appeal to our next meeting, at which time we would like to have the information that I've just shared with Karen. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'd make that motion.
David Saylor made that motion. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
And David seconds that. Thank you, David. And for this, I will call the question. Those in favor, Mr. Brown?
I'm in favor.
Mr. Saylor?
I'm in favor.
Mr. Steck?
I'm in favor.
And Mr. Warble?
Yes, I'm in favor.
All right, and chair abstains. So the motion's passed. We will table this, and Karen, we're going to wait for your wondrous information that you're going to share with us at our very next meeting. To the Copelands, I'm very sorry. I want to extend to you, this is not always as easy as we'd like it to be, but we don't want to go into this and do anything halfway, and we don't want to do any disservice to you in your appeal. This table and this continuation does not affect you in terms of cost. It's not going to cost you any more. We're not asking for any more money. It's simply to get the information that we need. So I just want to extend an apology to you for the delay, but this delay I think is necessary because we don't have this every day. And we want to make sure that not only are you protected, but I think the board wants to make sure that other residents, and you will be one of them here, will also be protected in whatever kind of precedents that we set.
Yes, I agree, and I appreciate everybody's careful consideration of it. Thank you.
With that, I'm going to ask for a motion to close out the hearing on this appeal. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion, Mike Brown.
Mike Brown makes the motion. Is there a second?
Brad will second.
Brad seconds, and without objection, so ordered. Okay. Thank you all. We're going to move on to the scintillating, exciting look at minutes from previous meetings. I'm sure nobody's going to want to miss that. Before I do ask about the minutes for the meeting, I need to go back to Karen and ask, are there any other information, any other announcements that you have for us that we need to be aware of?
Not at this time.
Great. So as we look at the minutes, there were a couple of things, and I think that they're very minor, but that I noticed that I wanted to just sort of get some corrections in. So before I go over anything, I'd like to go through the board. David, was there anything that you had that you saw that you wanted to see adjusted or corrected in those minutes?
Yes, on the last page, there's a typo error of Davis Sailor. So the one that goes in the record should be changed to David.
Okay, I see that.
Third line down on the last. That's
Yeah.
one thing. Yeah.
Do you see that, Karen?
I'm looking.
Last page, third line down.
Yes, I see that.
Great. David, was there anything else?
Not that I've seen. I read it all, but not that I picked up on it. Maybe I just haven't been called Davis. I'll do a lot of other things I have been.
Well, Davis, we appreciate that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mike.
I read the wrong thing, David.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brad,
well.
is there anything, Brad, that you see in these minutes?
Just down the middle of the first page under the variance questions, just a misspelled answered true, should be TRUE.
Okay, good.
That's right.
Anything else, Brad?
No.
Mr. Stack, David, do you see anything that on these minutes?
Try again. I'm good with them.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
Everything has been addressed that I saw.
Okay. So if I can, Karen, you keeping up with us?
I sure am trying.
Okay. Let me walk through here real quick. Okay. So if you look at on the first page, you'll see motion to close the public portion of the hearing. It says David Saylor.
Yes.
And then after that, it says seconded by Mike Brown.
Yes.
And that's correct. After that, this is one of those that we would have had, and you do have it in a couple of others places. This is where you would just simply say without objection, it was so ordered.
Okay.
Because we didn't take a vote on that. And the reason we do that, Karen, is simply to move things along whenever it's just a procedural thing, and it gives everybody the right to object. We don't have to go through a single roll call for each of those procedural pieces,
Okay.
not a motion on an appeal.
Okay.
So that would be inserted in there. The other thing is that if you look again on that same thing right below where it says discussion decision,
Uh-huh.
it says London. I can't even say my own name. Michael London entered a motion, and that would be entertained a motion.
Entertained, okay.
Yes, and it has a very different legal meaning. And just so as a point of reference, because you did get it right in other places. And when I've chaired a lot of boards over the years, and one of the things that I have, and it's just, we all operate differently, is a general rule, and in this role, my purpose is not to bend one way or the other as much as possible to stay out of it, is to provide questions, guidance. And when it comes to a motion, as a general rule, I will not make a motion. I might entertain a motion for somebody else to make.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why often I will say, I'll entertain this motion of whatever. And then I'll ask for someone to make the motion and then someone to second the motion. And then we'll either vote, or it might be a procedural thing, which we will do order, so ordered without objection. So
Okay.
I didn't, and I realized, Karen, I never explained any of that to you beforehand, so that you probably heard that I said I'm going to enter a motion. But that's what that is, and that's what it means in this particular case.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And then let me see here. On this, if you look at that again on this same one, so after the variance questions, so after that particular, it says variance questions, the motion, that motion was made by David Saylor and seconded by Mike Brown. There was a roll call vote on the appeal. So we need to indicate in the minutes that in fact that the board did vote
Okay.
for that appeal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we did vote on that.
I'm sorry, David?
We did vote on that.
Yes, we did. No, I know. And it just, the minutes, the way they're structured right now, don't quite reflect that specific, and they need to, because you made that, I just simply entertained a motion. You made the motion, David. Mike seconded,
Right.
and we did have a roll call vote, and it was all in favor. So I'm looking through here, and on the second one, so where you have on this one, Karen, and I know this is new, on page 2, where you have motion to close hearing. Generally speaking, in most of that places where it's not the hearing that we're closing down, it was a motion for the appeal.
The appeal.
And in this particular case, if I remember correctly, and David and the rest of you help me with this, if I remember correctly, this appeal died for lack of a motion.
So it should say motion to close appeal. that what you're
Actually,
saying?
no, you can strike that, because if I'm reading this correctly and memory serves, and Mike, and I'm going to ask you and David to help me, David Saylor, on this. David moved that since neither one meets the zoning text, not to allow this appeal to be approved. And it was seconded by Mike Brown.
Okay, I see that.
You see it?
Yes.
And I think that's accurate. You guys are going to have to tell me otherwise. So motion to close appeal or close hearing, and then second, those things can disappear. They don't need to be
Okay.
there. you can see where you got the roll call,
Mm-hmm.
which was this was approved, which was yes, yes, and 3 yeses. I abstained, and so did Brad Warble. So that
Right.
is actually the vote on the appeal, or on the motion for that appeal, which David Saylor made. And his motion was not to allow this appeal to be approved, and he gave the reasons why, and that was agreed to, not to allow it.
That's how I understand it.
Okay, there are times, Karen, when an appeal can in fact die or not be approved for the lack of a motion. In this case, there was the motion, and the motion was not to approve. And
Okay.
that was, so if that makes sense. So I don't want to get too crazy and make it too confusing. So that was something that I noticed. And so we want the minutes legally to protect everybody to reflect that.
Sure.
Let me see. I'm rolling down here. Okay. Okay, so if you go down to the next motion, and where it says discussion decision, okay? Brad Warble, from the description and the drainage, sees no problem. Do you see that, Karen?
Yes.
Okay, in that paragraph, if you go to the last sentence, it says Michael London entered a motion, and that again needs to be
Yeah,
entertained.
that's, okay.
Yeah, and that was to approve the appeal as requested, etc., just as you have it written there. And then that is not a motion to close the hearing. That the motion that I entertained was made by Brad Warble and seconded by David Stack. So motion to close hearing needs to change motion to approve appeal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I believe you have all of the roll call vote correct.
Okay.
Let's see. All right. And then we had minutes, and I think that was dandy. And then other announcements. And other thing I think I noticed was the fact that Davis Saylor was with us, but you already
Yes.
fixed that.
Definitely a
So,
typo.
yeah, I know. I'm teasing you. I don't see anything else. So we have this, of course, the recording for this. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to, unless anyone has another edit or change to the minutes, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, David. The motion's been made by David Saylor to approve the minutes as amended. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Mike Brown.
Thanks, Mike. Would keep us moving.
David, just if we could back up just a second.
Yes, Brad.
On the notes, down at the bottom on the first page.
Yes.
Let's see here. After it says Jeff can answer any questions, zoning administrator stated that a call came in yesterday opposing the lot split. No reason given, and if I remember correctly, no identification was made. And I'm of the opinion when those kind of calls come in, it shouldn't even be mentioned. If they can't identify themselves, we shouldn't even consider what they're saying.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I will disagree with the fact of whether or not it was in the minutes because it was stated at the meeting.
Gotcha.
The minutes purpose is only to reflect what did happen as best it possibly can. And no minutes are perfect, but to give the best essence. So that is a good point that we want to bring up, for Karen, that she doesn't, if someone doesn't identify, she doesn't necessarily, it is your feeling anyhow, if I'm correctly understanding you, that she doesn't necessarily even have to bring it if they won't identify themselves.
Yeah, if you're not going to identify yourself, you need to identify yourself with any kind of complaint or something. I mean, anybody they don't
Sure.
even need to be part of Perry Township to complain. You don't know who they are.
It's a baseless claim.
Yes.
Sure. And the fact that that's stated, or that we need to, but the fact that it was brought up in the meeting is accurate.
Correct.
And that I would suggest needs to continue to be part of the minutes.
Understood.
Okay, is anything else before I move forward? If
Yes,
not,
to Karen.
I'm sorry, David?
I say yes to Karen.
Yes.
Miss Karen, are you there?
I am here.
You'll get used to Mike. He likes to talk.
Oh, yeah. And David likes to take shots at me, and I love it. I know he still cares. Okay, so if there's no objection, it is so ordered that motion move forward, that these minutes are approved as amended. Is there any other? Karen, do you have anything else for us this evening?
No, I don't think so. Nothing else this evening.
Okay, great. And so if you could go ahead and then take care of letting us know, what's next. And as soon as you get the information, and clarify as to whether or not we in fact can address this at a meeting in October, which is generally the first Thursday. Or if there's something else that causes us a delay. If you could just, if we don't hear anything, we're going to assume that there's a meeting coming up. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I will definitely keep you guys in the loop.
And if you've got questions as you go through that process, about the code or anything, don't hesitate. To check with someone. David's been around for a long time and has had a level of familiarity. Mike has it. Any of the board members, and frankly, all of them are probably going to be better at the detail than I am. But don't hesitate to ask someone if you want to try and understand something or where to find it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. If there is no other business and no other announcements, then I'd like to. Yes.
David, I have one correction. Karen, it's a small correction on the hearing agenda for tonight. On the roll call,
Yes.
Sweet is mentioned. It should have been Steck.
All right, let me find this.
Good catch. I just went ahead and crossed it out and wrote over it, Brad.
Yeah.
But you're right.
I'm patient, but I appreciate that.
I don't know where I was when I did this, but okay, I will fix this.
Karen, were you thinking about chocolate?
I think Dave is pretty sweet.
Oh, wait a minute. It's getting deep. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good catch, Brad. If there's nothing else, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to that effect?
Mike,
Yes.
before you adjourn,
Sure. David, go ahead.
I would like to say to Karen that I hope everything works out and she does remain with us, and I believe that will get a vote from every one of us.
I think
I
we'll
agree.
be happy campers.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I have no plans of going anywhere.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Glad to
Good
hear.
news. Anything else? David, would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
David Steck or David Saylor?
I'm not proud. I'll take any David.
I'll flip you.
Okay. So did I hear David Steck move to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
And is there a second?
I'll second it, Mike Brown.
Mike Brown seconds. Without objection, so ordered. Thank you all very much. I know this is an adjustment. It's an adjustment for all of us to do meetings this way. And it is certainly for me to keep all my papers straight and try to remember what comes next. But I appreciate everybody's patience with this.
David, thank you. Thank you very much for your leadership. It's much appreciated.
Yep, thank you. It was great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Not a
thank you,
problem.
guys.
Y'all have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you in a month.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jason, thank you.
Not a problem. Happy to help.
All righty. Take care.